Thank you. We're listing now all the attributes, and when we have all the right ones, we'll summarize the list. Yes, Sana, what is important about a river valley or special?
Yes, I think it kind of allows for an effective ecosystem because the river is right there. Uh, a lot of other valleys and agricultural lands need to like a bigger and a longer irrigation channel that's usually underground, and that takes a lot of time and is inefficient. Because the river is right there, so it creates a system which
Take
is much more
accessibility to water.
easier. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Ariba, would you like to add something?
I just want to add that it also helps in building up the civilization as it provides water for irrigation and the cultivation, as well as it caters the basic need of individuals. So and they can do fishing over there. So it basically helps to create a civilization as well.
Thank you. All right. Now I'm seeing a little bit of the chat, and we have a lot of pertinent or relevant points there. I'm going to try and summarize some of them. So, the water itself, right, having access to a natural source of clean water and, very importantly, sweet water, right? There is a critical difference between river water and sea water. सो सी वाटर के साथ उसको ना आप पी सकते हैं ना आप उसके साथ कुछ उगा सकते हैं. So the accessibility to fresh, clean, sweet water allows for, of course, very simple, basic necessity of life, drinking water, right? Secondly, it allows you to grow things for which you need water, right? Thirdly, as many people mentioned, large river systems are actually navigable. Once human beings developed the technology to build simple rafts and boats, which was a really long time ago, and developed the ability to travel by water, it was a lot easier than traveling over land. So, trade of different types of goods, usually agricultural, but then eventually manufactured as well, uh, is enhanced by being near a river. But one of the most important characteristics has hardly been mentioned. I think that Sarim was trying to talk about it, but we couldn't hear him, and maybe Amna has mentioned it in the chat. That river valleys, the river beds, which is actually miles and miles of land on either side of the river, every year there is always a season in which major rivers flood, usually in the spring or the summer. हमारे यहाँ कब होता है? हमारे यहाँ मानसून के वक्त में होता है पूरे साउथ एशिया में, right? That's another thing that connects us all the way from Karachi to Dhaka. Everybody has the same monsoon because it's a geographic feature of the lands south of the Himalayas and the other mountain ranges. The rivers flood because one, that's when the snow has fully melted, and two, because the rains swell the volume of the water. So when rivers flood, what do they do?
They fertilize the soil
How?
with
I mean,
the
why?
silt. Silt. They have the
Silt.
silt.
What
Yeah.
is silt? Anybody? You don't need to know exactly, but what does silt do?
I
Uh,
think they
It
like
okay,
it
Vanya, go ahead.
assists. Okay.
So I feel like all the underlying nutrients and everything are brought up to the soil again.
Okay.
I don't know.
It improves the grip of the plants as well. It avoids erosion and everything.
Thank you. Technical expertise on the subject. Silt does many things, and basically, it's like uh, let's just call it a magic ingredient to help with growing things. It has nutrients, but yes, it also does what Abdullah just said. It helps to hold the soil together in a manner that is conducive to all kinds of plant growth. So, That's why river valleys are important. Can somebody or bunch of people help me name all the important known early human civilizations? एक तो हमारा अपना है इंडस वैली और ancient civilizations
Mesopotamia.
कौन से?
Taxila.
Yeah, little bit later, quite a bit later actually.
Egypt.
Aryan civilization.
Hang on, guys, please, hands up. There are too many of you to just speak out. Okay, let me pick on somebody who hasn't spoken yet. Muhammad Ali, would you like to say something?
Ancient civilizations could include the Egyptian civilization.
Egyptian, thank you. And why? Why do you think Egypt was one of the great ancient civilizations?
Because it developed around the river Nile of
Exactly.
Egypt.
It developed around, again, one of the great rivers of the world, which has a very fertile and widespread riverbed. Any others, Anas?
Uh,
One civilization that comes to mind, again linked to a river system, was ancient Chinese civilizations that lived around the Yangtze River.
That's
I'm
right,
totally
around the
butchering the
Yangtze
name.
River, another one of the great rivers of the world. Abira?
Okay, so the reading mentioned Aryans and Vedic.
अभी तो वहां पहुंचेंगे.
Okay, there's
Where-
also Greek civilization.
Greek, thank you. Which was slightly different. We'll get there. One more. We're missing one really important ancient civilization. Again, one of the earliest. So it is the one that is actually in competition with the Indus Valley civilization for being the oldest. Which one is that? Ayaz? Oh, Ayaz, but I can't hear you. Ifra, do you know? Do you have any sense?
Mesopotamian, I guess.
Thank you. Mesopotamian. Where is Mesopotamia? Anyone?
Iraq.
Have those rivers.
Which
The
two?
two
Euphrates and
rivers.
Tigris.
Yeah, which two
Euphrates
rivers?
and Tigris.
Yeah. The one that someone just mentioned.
The Tigris and the Euphrates.
Euphrates.
Yes.
Yeah, Euphrates. Yeah.
Okay, so the Tigris and the Euphrates, roughly in Iraq and bordering. Yes, who's speaking, Beta? Muhammad Ali. Yeah, go ahead. Oh dear, we cannot hear you now. So the Tigris and the Euphrates, it's not one of the great river systems in the world, as in these are not huge rivers like the Indus and the Ganges and the Nile and the Yangtze. But what they create is something that is known as the Fertile Crescent, because when these two rivers come together and join and they're coming at an angle from two different directions, so the shape that they create as they come together is roughly the shape of a crescent, and all the land in between those two rivers in that shape of the crescent was incredibly fertile land. So it's one of the cradles or earliest sites of human civilization where human beings learnt how to cultivate land. After, this is the stage after Homo sapiens were hunter-gatherers. I mean, they remained hunter-gatherers in other parts of the world for a very long time, and we still have tribes in like deepest, darkest Amazon jungle and the Congo River and so on who are still hunter-gatherers. But slowly, in certain special places like the Indus and the Fertile Crescent, human beings learned to settle down on fertile river valley lands, and they figured out how to grow stuff, which is a huge advancement in technology. I hope everybody understands that absolutely any tool that human beings have invented over thousands and thousands of years is called technology. You live in an age of electronic and digital technology, but that is just one period of technological development. The wheel, the invention of the wheel was a technological breakthrough. The invention of simple stone and wood tools for better hunting, and then later for agricultural purposes, these were technological revolutions. So do keep that one in mind, because we will talk about many things being technology. Okay, so here we are. One of the oldest sites of human civilization was the Indus River basin, because we now have established that rivers provide certain special uh, characteristics that allow for settled agriculture, and then later on for trade once people learn how to use the rivers for travel. Okay, now a new question for you. Everybody who has their hands up to respond to the previous discussion, please do take them down unless you want to respond to the question that I am about to pose. What is civilization? Why do we refer to human civilization? Aisha?
Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. Ma'am, I guess that this word is derived from the word civilized, and any a group of people who have who are civilized according to the people of their own time, and who have again Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. These places were very modern according to those times, and and the drainage system and everything. So it was a very rich, and it is called assumed to be a very rich and a modern civilization of that time, because the people were very organized and civilized, and even the way their governments were being working, and how democracy was working over there. So all of these elements combine in a civilization, I believe.
Okay, so I think perhaps a better word than modern, because modern means something very specific and refers to a very specific period, we might use the word advanced. That societies like the Indus Valley, settled agricultural societies, tended to be more technologically advanced and therefore more wealthy than others. But that's not really the core meaning of civilization. You are absolutely right, Aisha. That's how we've come to use it today. Abdullah?
I just wanted to say it's a societal system which has its own unique and distinct characteristics and laws and culture and everything.
A societal system with its own unique characteristics, laws, and culture. What is a societal system?
I would say an organization of people living together.
Yeah. So when we talk about society and the word social, it is about uh, creatures living together, and not just living together, but living together in a way that enhances their lives through cooperation. Of course, now we know that many creatures in the animal kingdom also do that, right? So certainly all the great apes, who are our nearest cousins, and dolphins and elephants and other intelligent mammals also live cooperative social existences. So what makes for a civilization? Iman?
Yeah, so for a society to be called a civilization, it's very important that the people over there have a fixed, a kind of communication and maybe some sort of urban development and a form of government.
Urban development, form of government, language, but you know that dolphins and whales and chimpanzees and elephants also have language. What are you missing, guys? Something really basic that is connected to what we were discussing right before this. Ramin?
I think they also have this like a systematic way of gathering basic resources for the entire population. Um, like first of all, their focus is on like food and water and how to get it in a sustainable and continuous way.
Yeah, sure. The organization of resources in order to maximize resources. That's true. That's very true. That's a good point. Umair?
Maybe agriculture is also really important for a civilization to exist. So when we look at all these
Thank you.
rivers, yeah.
Carry on. No, no, I just meant thank you for finally bringing that up. We were putting the cart before the horse. यानी हम बाकी आगे वाली चीजों पे आ गए थे जो basis है वो agriculture है. Umair, anything to add?
No, miss, thank you.
Okay. Alina?
Ma'am, we are discussing the definition of civilization, right?
जी, बिल्कुल.
So, ma'am, in my opinion, a civilization happens when the ways of living socially and culturally changes in an area.
Changes how? क्या होता है?
मैम एडवांसमेंट आ जाती है उनके वे ऑफ लिविंग में, जैसे कि आपने कहा था कि इंस्टेड ऑफ मॉडर्नाइजेशन वी विल यूज एडवांसमेंट, तो उस तरह उनके वेज ऑफ लिविंग में चेंजिंग आती है और फिर वो थोड़ी एडवांस बन जाते हैं.
ठीक है. मरियम?
Yes, so adding to the point of Alina, I feel like it's also like characterized by urban development, where you bring in new technology, and as you said, agriculture is like the basis. So in a civilization, it's basically being advanced with new form of technology. Agriculture be advanced with there, and then there's culture, and economic system, and the way of governance. They're all being advanced in a civilization, and that makes it different from other sorts of.
ठीक है. Ayaz? I can't hear you, Ayaz. Ayaz, if you have something to contribute, would you like to put it in the chat? Because I'm afraid I can't hear you. Till then, Tayyaba, what would you like to say?
Miss, I feel like a civilization has to be large, like it has to be a group of cities,
Could be.
if I'm sure.
Could be. Hamna?
Okay, so civilizations can, I think, also be characterized by the way people communicate and how their behaviors and how their behaviors change over time, advancement in their communication skills and the ways they communicate, basically.
All right. I think we've covered a lot, and now we are more or less saying the same things. So now let's try and put all of that in order. If you recall, a few minutes ago, I mentioned the term hunter-gatherer, right? Hunter-gatherers कौन होते हैं? How do they live? Like even today, when you have tribes living hidden deep inside the Amazon rainforest who have not really been touched by the modern world, they are still hunter-gatherers. How do hunter-gatherers live? Jyoti.
Hi, Matt, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so hunter-gatherers are basically people who hunt like animals, and that's how they gather resources and then they cook it or eat it raw. So basically, they're human shape of animals. I mean, that's how they eat food and gather their resources. They hunt for their food in the wild where they live.
They hunt animals for food. Gathering se kya murad hai? What do they gather? Jyoti did not get that. Mariam, Rehan? Mariam, you still there or you run away?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to answer about how they usually live. I think they are mostly nomadic and they move around. according to the weather or the climate, and where they found adequate supply of food. And they usually live in small, because they have to move a lot, so they don't have a proper or permanent location or permanent houses or place to live, and they usually live in tents made out of wood or sticks.
Okay, thank you. They are nomadic, and they are nomadic, meaning they move around a lot because they have to move around in order to live. They move seasonally, sometimes following the animals that they hunt and live on, right? Homo sapiens was very much part of the natural ecosystem and food chains of the earth. What is it that they gather? ये किसी ने अभी तक जवाब नहीं दिया है मेरा. Sarah, would you like to take a shot at that? What are they gathering? Why do we say hunter-gatherer?
I think they kind of go hunt and then bring their whatever they've hunted home back to their tribes or where they're temporarily settled down, and they gather food and water and
Okay.
maybe medicine or something.
I'm going to go to the bottom of the list now. Sana, what are hunter-gatherers gathering?
Miss, aside from food, they also like whenever they hunt animals, they take their skins, maybe teeth. They need leather, or maybe they want to make weapons from those skins वगैरह जो होती हैं चीज़ें. Skin is also really important. Like animal skin is like they use animal skin to make their own clothes, I think. So that's what I think they're gonna gather.
Okay. This is, I've obviously just been picking on the wrong people. Thank you, Josefa, for putting it into the chat. I will save everybody further torture. Fruits and nuts and leaves. Do you remember what you are? Is man a purely carnivorous animal or a purely herbivorous animal? No. Back to middle school science. We are omnivores. Thank you, Josefa. So, because we are omnivores and we evolved to be omnivores, and that is why there is this term. अगर सारा कुछ जानवरों के बारे में ही होता तो हम सिर्फ हंटर कहते. गैदरर हमने उसमें एक हाइफनेटेड नाम उनको क्यों दिया है? Why hunter dash gatherer? Because in order to survive and live, small human tribes wandered around usually a specific region, just like animals do, आगे पीछे, in a smallish region. Uh, in the summer, generally you'd go to a cooler place. In the winter, you'd go to a warmer place. But how far could they travel on foot, right? So not all that far. Um, although you'd be surprised at the distances that can be covered, but definitely within more or less some large region. And the reason they're doing it is not just following the animals where they are more plentiful, but also following natural plant life, following the growth of fruits and nuts and edible leaves and edible roots, which they would gather, right? That requires a process of gathering. Certainly things that can be preserved and kept for a longer period of time, like nuts, right? Nuts, of course, are seeds or kernels of seeds of plants, and they very early on learned how to dry them and keep them for a long period of time. Now, how is that different from agriculture? Can you just just take a moment to stop and really exercise your imagination and think about the absolutely massive, monumental step it must have been in the lives of human beings to go from a hunter gatherer existence to learning how to stay in one place and grow your own food. to tame nature, to cultivate it, to actually know how to use the resources of nature around and manipulate them in order to not just survive, right? But even have surplus. It's like absolutely mind blowing. Why do we call it agriculture? ये culture का लफ्ज क्या है? What is culture? Because civilization and culture are intimately related. So when we use the word culture, what are we really talking about? Muiz.
Miss, culture denotes way of living, all the social standards of a society.
Sure. Can we break it down and, you know, be a little more specific? Because, packs of pie dogs on the street also have a culture of sorts, a way of living, certain rules. Why do we call this? Yes, cultivation. Thank you, Amna Islam. Cultivation का मतलब क्या है? Culture, cultivation, ये सब related अल्फाज क्यों हैं? इनका मतलब क्या है? अब्दुल्ला.
I think the hand was from the previous question. I forgot to raise it down, but I think when you're talking about culture, it's more about beliefs and knowledge about like certain things. So when it comes to agriculture, it's more about like science of I don't know, being a farmer or getting food through that.
Okay. Ramin.
Yes, I think the advent of agriculture kind of shifted their focus from surviving to sustenance. Like, rather than simply focusing on getting enough food to get through like a period of time, they could now focus on a little bit more kind of intricate things like organizing themselves into structures and assigning like different tasks.
Sure. So agriculture allowed for a lot of things, right? And we're quite familiar with the things that agriculture allowed for, that it created the environment for, and we have talked about them quite a lot. What we are still collectively quite unable to do is maybe articulate that shift from hunter gatherer existence to discovering agriculture. Just like, just try to imagine. So, a hunter gatherer life really follows the patterns of nature. A hunter gatherer human tribe is entirely subject to the natural patterns of nature. You follow the food, you follow the water. And it is only when human beings learn to stop needing to do that, when they learn to do things that frees them from the need to always follow the patterns of nature, like everybody else in the animal kingdom. That's really this, historically speaking, this moment of momentous change in the history of the human race. And it is the moment that they discover, obviously not a single moment, but a period of time in history in which human beings learn ways in which they can avoid having to be entirely subject to what we might even call the tyranny of natural patterns. right? जाहिर है ना, जब अगर किसी जगह में कहर आ जाए, वहां हर साल बारिश होती है लेकिन 3 साल से नहीं हुई, तो सब मर जाएंगे, इंक्लूडिंग ऑल द एनिमल एंड प्लांट लाइफ, so on and so forth, right? Nature can be very cruel, and there is no way of controlling that without the development of social organization and technology. That's really the motivation for human beings to have developed technology, following which came social organization, because basic technology came during hunter-gatherer times. They developed hunting tools, right? That's why we call a certain period in time the Stone Age, because human beings learned how to manipulate and carve stone. And they would make sharp little arrowheads of stone and attach them with reeds and roots to sticks of wood in order to fashion a spear, which made hunting so much easier and more doable. They discovered fire while they were still hunter gatherers. And really, the purpose of fire was not so much to cook the food, that came much later. It was to keep other animals, predatory and dangerous animals, away and to provide warmth. Cooking probably happened accidentally. That's, we'll never know, but that's the historical speculation. So, basic technologies to improve life were already part of a hunter gatherer lifestyle. The sea change, the momentous change comes when people figure out that they can grow their own food. All right, now I think I've hammered that point home enough. We will circle back to defining these terms that we want to define, because without defining these terms, we really cannot proceed. And that's really all we need to do with the Indus Valley civilization. What is special about the Indus Valley civilization? You already know from your high school and middle school textbooks. But obviously, till this point, you have not been asked to think deeply about what it means to move from being hunter gatherer animals with minimal technology to becoming settled creatures who develop culture and through culture, civilization. So why doesn't somebody just look up the word culture? इसका basic मायना क्या है? What is its basic definition? What is culture? Maria, would you still like to speak?
Yes, miss. So I had a question that the shift that you're talking about, how long did it, approximately your estimate, like if you can give me an estimate, how long did it take?
Thousands of years.
Or is it still in the works? Because, we still are evolving and we still are.
Different things are in the works. Different things are in the works. But that particular shift from not knowing that agriculture was possible to knowing that it is possible, that's happened thousands of years ago. That is what allowed for what we label as historians, what we label the first human civilizations, the people who settled down on the fertile river banks of the Indus and the Nile and the Euphrates and the Yangtze, etc., and learned how to grow their own food instead of chasing it.
Thank you.
Azan, your hand is still up. Would you like to try? Okay. Would you like to try again? Good. I can hear you now.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the first time. So, culture, as a such, it is derived from the Latin word color, and cultivation is also derived from it. Basically, what my understanding was that cultivation refers to the growth and development of something. So you can mean the cultivation of your personality, cultivation of your mind, but basically in the civilization and in culture, we are mainly referring to the cultivation of soil, making it appropriate for the growth of plants and crops. So I think that's where civilization and culture came about from.
Thank you. Very articulately put, right? Cultivation, the idea of cultivation and growing something in a systematic, controlled way where the human being is in control and Mother Nature is not. Aisha.
Ma'am, I believe that a shift from hunter-gatherer to agriculture would mean that there would be very few areas that were fertile. और वहाँ पे जो लोग जाके settle हुए and the way they started working and a shift from survival to sustenance and wealth creation meant that उन्होंने specialize करना शुरू कर दिया particular चीजों में और arts और skills का वहाँ पे काम शुरू हो गया और उनका जो group है वो identify होने लगा due to their skills and their craftsmanship.
ठीक है, जो बाद में होता है, ठीक है ना? So now I'm going to go back to a word I mentioned a little while ago called surplus, right? The idea of surplus. Hunter-gatherer societies live a life which is bare survival, right? Just basic needs: food, water, shelter. That's it. When you settle down and start growing your own food, something else happened. Human beings learned to grow things in a way that nature did not. A particular kind of thing that allowed for a surplus of food the year round through different seasons. What was this new type of food that they learned to grow that had not existed in hunter-gatherer life? Arisha?
Farmed.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yes. Can I speak?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Miss, I think you are talking about specialization. The hunter-gatherer were self-reliant, self-sufficient, but sometimes they start specializing and start having excess of their the food or the agriculture they would have cultivated, and then they start exchanging through barter system. And that's how I think they develop
You're
culture.
right. You're right. Specialization does take place, but Yaba actually has got it right, as has Iman and Shahan and Anusha and Vanya. Grains, right? Grains, growing grain, whether it is wheat or corn or rice or barley or oats. What is special about grain?
खराब नहीं होगा.
GLE?
I think the special thing about grain is that it can be stored, and
Yeah.
it survives some time, or उसकी वजह से it's stored or फिर surplus में रहता है, and because of that it allows for them to if they cultivate enough of it, they can store it in surplus, and then they don't have to look for food, which means they don't have to look for food elsewhere, and they have it in their stores, and which means they can focus on other things.
Perfect. Exactly. So grain and learning how to cultivate and grow grain is what really allowed for surplus. Because grain, as you very rightly, so many of you are saying, can be stored, and somebody also made the very important point that it can be regrown, right? It has these two fantastic qualities. So it was really grain that was the key to human civilization. Grain. Now, once you learn how to grow grain, you learn how to store it, you learn how to regrow it. Two things happen. You have a surplus of food, and eventually you have a surplus of what? Something else.
Miss, water, I think.
No. Josefa?
Surplus of maybe workforce.
Okay, you're getting close. Some people would be free to do other things. Jyoti?
Miss, I think they would have a surplus of time, because the time they would spend on growing their food or hunting for their food again and again on a daily basis, they can spend it on other things like building their homes or caring for their children, something like that.
Bullseye. That's right. Time. Hunter-gatherer lives, every minute of every day is accounted for, because it literally took every minute of every day to actually manage basic survival for the tribe or the social unit. Settling down and learning how to grow grain and learning how to preserve grain freed up a lot of time. Time meant that human beings could focus on figuring out other things. Time and a surplus of food/wealth, right? Because wealth was basically food early on, either grain or cattle, right? So, around the same time that people are learning how to grow grain, they are also learning how to domesticate certain useful animals. Which are those useful animals? Dogs, well, yes. Sheep, cows, camels.
Cattle.
Yeah, so what do cows, goats, and camels have in common?
They are farm animals.
I know, but what can they do for you?
We can eat them.
They can provide you milk.
Milk. And from milk, human beings learn to make all kinds of other things, right? What is butter? What is cheese? What is yogurt? It is milk in another form where it retains the nutrition of milk but can be stored for longer periods of time. दूध तो जब ताजा होता है आप उसको एक ही दिन रख सकते हैं, वो अगले दिन आप नहीं पी सकते. So cattle allowed for another source of food that was daily and could be stored. Meat, you're right, Vanya. People did learn how to preserve meat, especially in cold, barren places like Northern Europe, which is really where meat preservation was developed. They learned how to put it out in the sun and dry it, rub it with salt and preserve it, smoke it over a fire, and then it would last them through the winter. In places like South Asia, that wasn't really possible because of the climate. It's mostly warm and humid. So it is easier to preserve things like yogurt and cheese because they like humidity. That is also cultivation, the domestication of useful animals and creating surplus food using those animals created again wealth and time. So we've got grain and cattle that go together, free up a lot of human time. And that time, right, that time is really important, leisure time. That leisure time is very important because it allowed for scientific and cultural creativity. And those two things were not very different when we speak in historical terms. It was just about figuring out, innovating, and inventing more and more things that made human life easier and better, right? So eventually, people learned how to use the earth and different types of soil to make clay and therefore to make pottery. So now what could you do? You had things in which to store your grain. You had things in which to store water and carry it to a slightly further distance from the river and have it there for a couple of days and not need to go back. Aha, Sarim has a very good question. What about spirituality? It is definitely part of the evolution of human culture and civilization. Anybody have any sense of what the historical speculation is on the origins of human spirituality? Muhammad Ali?
So there's I don't know, I think there is a wide matlab, variety of ideas when it comes to,
Bilkul,
the
because we
origin of
can't
human.
ever know for sure, right? It's too long ago.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the interesting ones that I've heard is that, basically, people started developing, from they transition from hunter gatherers into, more agriculture based societies and civilizations.
Settled. The word we'll
So
use is settled because जो आप लोगों ने सबसे pertinent चीज hunter gatherers के बारे में कही है कि वो nomadic थे. Agriculture allowed us to settle, and once we settle, then we can do other things. Go ahead, Mohammed Ali.
So when they settled, and so they started building closer communities, and like it started from 10, 100 and thousands. So इससे फिर cities develop होना शुरू हुई. And जब like there are a lot of people living together in a group, like one person doesn't know everyone. So there's supposed to be कह लें कि एक consensus on a single thing like okay, so there's this idea, there is this myth or whatever, I believe in this and this other person believes in this, and because of that we share this belief. I can also trust him कि यार अगर मैं इसको अपनी ये फसल दूंगा तो
Oh, हाँ.
इसके through मतलब there was this like shared beliefs, and it started to pop up because of as a need for trust or trade.
Okay.
But,
I'm actually going to thank you for bringing it up, Sarim, but I'm going to park that question for now because I just want to move on with our re-examination of the historical implications of this thing that we call the Indus Valley civilization. Let us now go back to our textbook knowledge, right, from school. What are the things you know about the Indus Valley civilization? What are its characteristics? What do we know? Anas.
Oh, I wanted to answer the previous question, but I can add to this as well. They were known for having a sort of literary culture, but the language that they wrote in, and they believed in a goddess of fertility, which I wanted to point out. They
Go
had
for
a
it. Yeah, that works.
symbol for that. And that implies that they did believe in some form of a superior being helping them out in agriculture and settling in places. But it was really cool to see when I looked up pictures of the script that they wrote in. I believe it's called, uh, I can't spell it. It's cuneiform, Cuneiform.
Cuneiform is a description of certain types of ancient scripts. Does anybody know what cuneiform is? Go ahead
I
and look
believe
it up
it's
if you want to.
I believe it's mostly symbolic more so than
Right, which
uh,
means what?
they. Uh, so, for example, I noticed that instead of using words, they use pictorial descriptions of oxes and occasionally other animals and stuff like that.
Right. Okay, so you have established not okay. Please understand the difference, guys.
Okay.
Language is very old. Hunter-gatherers would have had language, yani ke a verbal, sound-based way of communication. What is a breakthrough in human technology is the development of script, of using visual symbols to represent spoken language. Has
Also,
these, yeah, so
sorry.
Anas, has the script of the Indus Valley civilization been deciphered? Do we know how to read it?
So from what I found out researching on it, it was that some mostly white people claimed that it is non-linguistic in the sense that it's mostly meant to represent certain gods and certain things that were meaningful to them rather than verbal communicated language that they would otherwise use. But I'm not sure about the legitimacy of this.
Well, the simple answer to my question is no, we haven't deciphered it. Unlike other scripts that have been deciphered, such as ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, which are also an advanced form of cuneiform script, where each letter is not a letter like A or Aleph. It is a picture representing either an idea or a sound. Chinese and Japanese still work that way.
If I may ask a question, how have we not been able to decipher the Indus script and we've been able to decipher other scripts? Just for example, I remember the a really old text like the Epic of Gilgamesh was also written in a similar Akkadian script, but that was being able to that was deciphered, but somehow this is not.
Okay, that's a really, really good question. I'm going to answer it quickly, and then we'll go back to the features of the Indus Valley civilization. So this is one of the great remaining challenges and mysteries for archaeologists. is the cracking or the deciphering of the Indus Valley writing system. The reason that other ancient writing systems or scripts were deciphered has nothing to do with the brilliance and creativity of archaeologists. It has to do with the very simple and helpful fact that many important texts that were originally, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which you mentioned, were originally written in an ancient cuneiform type script and then rewritten in later, more developed scripts, which we call representational or symbolic scripts, like English, Urdu, and Arabic, right? The two scripts that you guys know. Those are purely symbolic scripts where a letter stands for a sound, and then you put letters together to make a string of sounds that is a word. That's what symbolic or representational scripts are. And they are a much later development in human civilization. Very early scripts were pictures. So hieroglyphs were entirely, like Egyptian hieroglyphs, entirely accidentally deciphered by virtue of something called the Rosetta Stone. Has anybody heard of the Rosetta Stone? Do you know what it is? I'm sorry, it's a digression, but it's very fun and important. Mohammad Ali, you've unmuted. Do you know what the Rosetta Stone is?
Yeah, it's from a time I think basically it's a stone that has ancient hieroglyphic or Egyptian hieroglyphic as well as another script. तो historians ने क्या किया उनको वो वाली script तो एक basically उस पे एक laws वगैरह लिखे हुए थे तो एक मतलब मुआहिदा हुआ
Exactly.
था तो
वो तीन scripts में एक ही चीज लिखी हुई थी.
एक ही चीज लिखी हुई थी तो उनको वो scripts आते थे तो उन्होंने फिर उधर से ancient hieroglyphic को मतलब
Exactly.
transliterate
It
किया
was like
और
just stumbling upon a banaya code. Something very
Yeah.
similar happened for the Mesopotamian ancient script, जिसमें Gilgamesh recorded है. So we have nothing like the Rosetta Stone for Indus Valley. That's all. So it is the only known ancient script which has not been preserved for long enough. There's no bridge. You see, so what happened in Egypt is that Egyptian civilization, even though there were migrations as well as conquests from outsiders, ancient Egyptian civilization was never destroyed without a trace. This is what seems to have happened to the Indus Valley civilization. Now, because ancient Egyptian civilization was not destroyed without a trace, there was continuity with later civilizations that prospered along the riverbeds of the Nile. And one of those was Greek. You know that Greece is literally just across the pond. The Mediterranean Sea is the size of a pond. So the Greeks at some point invaded most of North Africa, but especially northern Egypt. So the Rosetta Stone has ancient Greek on it, as well as Egyptian hieroglyphs. And ancient Greek was preserved across the world because it was a civilization that had influenced many other civilizations. And so many, and they were also a civilization that was starting to use papyrus scrolls and things like that. So a lot of writing was preserved for a long period of time. Till today, actually. So that is how they were able to decipher the Rosetta Stone. Now, again, this unique feature of the Indus Valley civilization that at some point, somehow, it was abruptly obliterated. Anybody have any idea as to why or how that happened? And the floor is still open to the original question, which was, what do you remember of the features of the Indus Valley civilization? But to that, I'm adding, what do you know about how and why it ended? Umair.
Miss, are you asking about the features of the civilization?
Both questions are still open and they are related. So go ahead.
Okay, so for the first one, they did develop some sort of like city planning
method.
So yeah. like really basic, like sort of communes. And they also developed some standard measurement tools, which also help them, throughout the city. And with regards to how it was destroyed, I think it was the Vedic, I don't know how to say it, the Vedic war that happened, and apparently there was a war waged against them.
All right. So here's what we have so far. I'm going to recap. We have mentioned some form of organized religion and spirituality. We have mentioned that there was a script, and we have mentioned that there was some form of urbanization or cities. Um, Anybody like to add to these features? Josefa?
जी, तो मैं ये कह रहा था कि गलियों का निज़ाम काफ़ी अच्छा था और मतलब ड्रेनेज सिस्टम भी उन्होंने बनाया हुआ था और एक ग्रैनरी भी थी, मतलब अनाज घर भी था स्टोर करने के लिए। और उन्होंने कुछ ऐसे आसार भी मालूम हुए जो मतलब टावर्स थे, मतलब वॉच टावर, ताकि अगर कोई हमला करता है तो उसको देखा जा सके। और एक बाथ भी उनको मिला है जहाँ पर मतलब पब्लिक बाथ होगा जहाँ पर वो नहाते होंगे।
वाओ,
और
थैंक यू।
मूर्तियाँ भी मिली
हाँ,
हैं स्टैचू।
मूर्तियां तो मिली हैं।
जी, और उनमें से एक कहते हैं कि शायद वो किसी प्रीस्ट की हो, क्योंकि उसने एक टोपी टाइप की लगाई हुई है और चादर लगाई
बिल्कुल,
हुई
एक
है।
मदर गॉडेस है और एक प्रीस्ट है। ये भी स्पेकुलेशन है, but anyway, there's a male figure and a female figure. All right, thank you. So what Josefa is focused on are the things that we know about the cities, which some of you have mentioned, right? There are these two great excavation sites that are Indus Valley era cities, Mohenjo-daro in Sindh and Harappa in Punjab. And these cities have these amazing technologically advanced features like a drainage system. I mean, that's truly mind blowing. Can you imagine working out the mathematics and the engineering for that? A granary. Why is a granary important? It's not just a room in which you store grain. Again, engineering is definitely required. It's a room in which you can store grain in an optimal way, right? How do you build a place where grain will remain cool and dry in the hot, humid climate of Hindustan? So they figured out ways in which to do that. Thank you, Zefa, for the mention of the watchtower, right? So that means that they were organized enough. In fact, let me rephrase that. One of the many reasons cities were built as opposed to villages, and we should understand the difference between cities and villages, but one of the reasons was all over the world was protection from military violence from other people, from other societies. So cities were actually identified primarily by one thing: walls. Cities had walls. Ancient cities, medieval cities, early modern cities. Cities are walled settlements. Josefa also mentioned public baths. That is a feature that you find in other ancient civilizations also. You get it in Egypt, you get it in Greece. And it's interesting because it is connected to a growing awareness of the importance of hygiene for health. And that's also science. Does anybody have anything to add? I think we've done quite well on features of the Indus Valley civilization. Ifra? Oh, wait, Sana, you speak very little. Go ahead, Sana.
Ma'am, I also wrote in the chat, I read that Indus Valley, like the inhabitants of Indus Valley civilization, they also developed techniques like handicraft techniques like seal carvings and metallurgy. I think metals ka kuch tha, copper, bronze ka kuch tha.
Bilkul. Handicraft. So craft. And craft is a technology, right? How do you manipulate and use and build from natural materials like clay and stone and metal, right? That is all craft, and craft is pure technology. Yeah, toys, jewelry, other handicrafts, including items for daily use, right? Storage vessels and so on. But isn't that interesting? The idea of toys and jewelry. Thank you for bringing that up. I think it sums up our discussion for today very nicely. What is interesting and different about the making of toys and the crafting of jewelry? What does that tell you about the people of the Indus Valley civilization? Ramin?
So I think jewelry and toys kind of characterize recreation and decoration as opposed to doing something for survival. And so it kind of
That's absolutely right. Yes. Um,
so
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, that was it. It basically just
Okay.
means that they started to focus more on like the idea of maybe like well-being or pleasure rather than just sustenance.
Yeah. Laiba?
Okay, so Miss, that what I have researched about it, I mean, I've studied about it, is like they used to make like toys from like bricks or something or clay sibi, and their jewelry was really you can say मतलब that's what I see क्योंकि जो designs होते थे we can relate to today's kind of design that we use. They were like most developed until उनके पास फर्क इतना था that they didn't have digital technology, but उनकी जो jewelry और उनके जो designs होते थे and the toys तो खैर उनके बहुत ही different होते थे. But the thing is that the designs of the jewelry are like we use in the contemporary world as well, like.
Perhaps we were inspired. But yes, basically, what is interesting about those artifacts is that they have nothing to do, they're not practical. It's not an urn for water or a jar for grain or a wheel to put on a bullock cart. It's entirely for pleasure. And that at the end of the day becomes like being able to reach that point of having surplus wealth and surplus time is where we start marking a settled human society as a civilization, where they are starting to cultivate things um, that are completely beyond the practical. Where I think Sarim, you mentioned aesthetics, where where craft now starts to become art, and beauty has a place in human life, and the creation of beauty and the appreciation of beauty. Toys, right? Children in hunter-gatherer societies would just have been like on the move with their parents, and as they grew, depending on their age, they would have more and more duties that they could and would take care of. But toys indicates a society settled, secure, and rich enough to bring up their children entirely in leisure. And by the way, it is that leisure that eventually led to organized education and learning as part of what children from settled and wealthy societies could do. So then they were brought up and trained in a way that was very different from a hunter gatherer society. So it is that leisure and that surplus wealth that really create civilization. We're over time, but I'd like to take a few more answers on how the Indus Valley civilization ended in this total and abrupt way, unlike, for instance, the Egyptian.
Miss, could you repeat your question, please?
What do we know about how and why the Indus Valley civilization ended so totally and so abruptly, unlike the Egyptian or others? Got the same hands again. Okay, Aisha.
Ma'am, what I know it is about that it was due to a natural disaster like flooding or something.
Right. So that's one of the popular theories, that it may have been an enormous natural disaster, the kind of flood probably brought on by an earthquake, because remember where the Indus is? The Indus is the border of the subcontinent, and therefore it sits on a major fault line. It's where two big plates meet. So an earthquake and a flood might be one of the reasons, where there was so much devastation that it was almost impossible to recover from it.
Ma'am, there is one more thing that I would like to add. It was that it might have been invaded by the Aryans or destroyed by them.
Invaded by the Aryans and destroyed by them. That is another popular theory. And really, climate change. Thank you, Noor. And climate change and the natural disaster may well have come together, right? Where there may have been a period of sharp decline followed by a huge natural disaster, followed by an invasion. It's entirely likely that all three of these things happened in succession or in tandem. And the reason I'm saying that is because if these major cities of the Indus Valley civilization were wealthy and strong, yani ke wealthy enough to keep their walls in good repair, to make weapons, to train men to fight, they are quite likely to have repelled something like the Aryan invasion. And we don't even know if it was a particularly violent invasion or whether it was simply a migration. Ji Muhammad Ali.
Yes, the very last point you mentioned. I think, pehle to, I mean, there's like we can agree that there is no consensus on this issue as of yet. Ke, like we don't really know. Okay, like what exactly was it that that led to their end? So because I've heard, I मतलब बहुत bizarre theories मिली me, like मैंने एक दफा ये भी देखी थी कि like there are traces of radioactive waste over there, like इस तरह का भी सीन था. But like जो मुझे लगता है और जो मैंने सुनी हुई है, एक जो मुझे the one that I like is that they migrated to what is now the southern part of India, वो Tamil Nadu वाली civilizations, because they are also very old. तो मैंने ये सुना है कि like there was some sort of like motivation to move, के like हो सकता है कि उनको ऊपर attack करने वाला हो या फिर climate खराब हो रहा हो, so they left all of those things over there and then they migrated
south.
Migrated south.
Yeah, true. However, there does seem to be some genetic evidence for this. What is interesting, though, is the same point that we've been circling around, that there seems to be no trace of the Indus Valley civilization script that moved or stayed alive with any society in South Asia or neighboring regions, as you might have expected, as happened with other ancient civilizations. My last quick question is, does anybody remember the dates? Because we really need to start talking dates and periods soon. What are the dates for the Indus Valley civilization? It's a long period of time. I just want a period.
2500 BC.
2500 BC, sure. How much older, though? Now our excavations have revealed that, at least in a non-urban form, the civilization existed.
The reading mentioned that suggestions have been found that it existed like as far as 6000 BC.
And where are those suggestions? Does anyone know?
I think around like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. I am not sure though.
No, these very very
There
old
is one is
traces.
Balochistan,
जी, उसको क्या कहते हैं? उस
Mehergarh,
साइट का क्या नाम है?
Mehergarh,
Mehergarh.
Mehergarh.
Mehergarh, that's
Mehergarh.
right. So the Mehergarh excavations indicate that the same people who evolved the advanced urban societies of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were developing from hunter-gatherer to settled agriculture to urban from the Mehergarh onwards. Okay, so we can actually, as of this point, place a date as far back as about 6,000 to 5,000 BC. Do we have an idea of when we lose all trace of the Indus Valley civilization? Around when would it have ended?
Maybe somewhere between 2000 to 1500 BC, because that's the general time period where the Aryans were kind of.
Yeah, something like maybe 13 or 1400 BC. When we are talking about ancient civilizations, uh, our dating is not very precise. So we tend to talk in terms of centuries, which of course we will stop doing as we come further down the line in history. Then we can actually talk about specific years or specific decades, and in more modern history, specific days of the year. But when we are talking about ancient history, which is what the Indus Valley civilization is, it is the ancient era. We will talk in terms of centuries. And it's a really, really long time that this society or civilization seems to have flourished. I will leave you to do the math. Somewhere between 7,000 BC to about 1500 BC. We can round it off at that. ठीक है? Because around that time, starting around 1500 BC, you have the Aryans coming in. And there is some correlation between the two. We just don't know quite what. We'll pick up with the Aryans soon. However, on Thursday, I've asked you to come in, and I may ask you to do that on other Thursdays as well. But this week in particular, because I have managed to invite a historian colleague from Habib University who's an expert in ancient civilizations, but not Indus Valley, in Hinduism and Buddhism. And he's going to come and talk to us about that period of Indian history, which follows this period of Indian history. So you're going to have your first assessment this week, which is, the first quiz of many quizzes. I don't design them such that you have to study extra. So long as you're in class and you're paying attention and you're keeping up with the readings and you're taking some notes, you should more or less ace all the quizzes. I will heavily focus this week on what happens in the lecture on Thursday. So please do try to be there. If you have, and I do understand if you have a genuine reason for staying away from campus, please send me an email explaining so that I can make an alternate arrangement for you. All right? Okay, guys.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Ji beta.
Ma'am, can you please upload this slide?